It's been a while since I've done one of these, but I've kind of decided now this working from home life, this working from home studio that I got going on during these quarantine times of ours, that I'm going to bring you more Steelers live chats, especially with what's going on in the sports world, because while everyone's pushed pause, the NFL has still kept on moving, keeping to their calendar, and the NFL still has tons of news. We have a lot going on, of course, on Steelers Now, as you can venture over there right now, and you'll see Steelers Now primed and full with Steelers coverage, Steelers news, and the Steelers have done a lot with their roster. They've been very, very active, so I think it makes sense to do Steelers live chats again, especially when I have a middle-of-the-day period that's kind of free for this. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and this Steelers live chat, it's going to be there to answer any questions you may have. You can chat along with me. I can talk about the roster and the recent moves the Steelers have made. Ramon Foster retiring, comments by Cam Hayward even to what he's doing in the offseason. Derek Watt now a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Artie Burns moving on. Different moves with the roster because the Steelers roster looks different, and I think these moves actually make the Steelers roster better. Or we can also talk about some rumors the Steelers are involved in, and maybe one rumor in particular, which also fueled my fire for wanting to do a show right now. I was going to do a show with just a hot take on this, which probably would have done well because it's getting tons of traction in terms of the rumor mill for Jameis Winston and the Pittsburgh Steelers, and, well, I've touched on this on Twitter. I've touched on this on past shows. I've done other shows throughout this channel throughout the Steelers offseason, and I've touched on really everything else that exists in the Steelers offseason, except for this here in a video to you. So I think you deserved it because if you aren't or are not following me on Twitter, you've missed my takes there. And let me tell you, this is one rumor that just won't go away and bothers me more than any other. So we'll let you guys kind of dictate this. We'll do questions on what's going on with the Steelers, and then as we go, whether or not I get questions, I'm going to touch on my thoughts on the possibility of Jameis Winston and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if you happen to listen to this after that either happens or doesn't because the national media is trying to force it on, well, this will be here for you, and these takes will still make tons of sense because they're going to be my takes regardless of where that goes. There's my nameplate there that I almost forgot. Again, I'm your host, Mike Asti, and this is a Steelers live chat edition of Mic Drop here on Steelers Now and, of course, Pittsburgh Sports Live. Want to thank the sponsor, Beaver County Auto, for making this possible. All of the Steelers, WV Sports Now, and Pittsburgh Sports Now related shows that I do and anyone does here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, any of those post-game shows, any of our normal content between games, post-game press conferences, from coaches, players, locker room coverage, anything for Pittsburgh Sports Now, Steelers Now, and WV Sports Now. It's sponsored here by Beaver County Auto and many other sponsors as well. Well, I guess I already got some activity there to start things off. Eric Ebron, well, I touched on that on Twitter, and I think that's one of the best moves any team has made so far this offseason. Maybe it will be the most impactful move the Steelers have made this offseason. And again, I like most of what they've done so far. But Eric Ebron is a relatively young tight end, been very, very productive recently, one of the most underrated players in all of football. He's only 26 years old. They got him for $12 million for 2 years. Put this in perspective. The Chicago Bears signed Jimmy Graham for $16 million for the same amount of time. Jimmy Graham, 6 years older, I believe almost maybe 7 years older now, basically living off of what he did years ago when he was one of the best tight ends in football, certainly as a patch guesser. But he's been very, very slow. He's been a shell of his former self in recent years. He's now almost become a journeyman where clearly he's not viewed with as much value that he was made available, and the Bears were able to pick him up. And the Bears end up paying him $4 million more than the Steelers give Eric Ebron, who even looked throughout the tight end market. Look at what other teams have done. The Steelers get Eric Ebron on kind of a bargain based on how old he is, based on his age, and based on his production for that dollar figure. Whereas, again, the Bears are going to pay more to an older guy who's not been as productive, and the ceiling is so bright in the future for Ebron in comparison to Jimmy Graham. And that was also the one move the Steelers had to make. The Steelers had to bring in a tight end, because I get they normally sign guys either as unrestricted free agents recently or in trades recently, and that goes against what they've been doing throughout the history of Kevin Colbert and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I get Vanett coming over and how that doesn't work out, and he now is gone off the team. I get how they've been trying to put scotch tape on this and sign maybe guys that aren't as known as free agents or, again, off trades like they did midway through last season. And maybe you'd rather have them go deal with this in the draft and build a guy who's going to be maybe 21, 22, 19, 20 years old and could be there for the next decade plus, like a Heath Miller, his whole career with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, that just wasn't going to happen in this draft. The tight end market is very, very weak coming up. The tight end draft market is minuscule. There's nobody as a top-fledged tight end draft prospect coming up in this year's draft, or really next year's draft either. The Steelers know they have Big Ben for next year. He's obviously going to be the starter. He's a better option than the two backups they had last year with Rudolph and Duck. And regardless of what they do, bring in Winston or whoever else to back up Ben as more of a veteran, Ben's going to be your starter. That's just a fact, whether you like it or not. And Ben is going to be better than what they just had. He's, I think, going to be less turnover prone and still give you the yards he's had recently. But regardless of how Ben plays, he is older. He is declining. He is not what he was years ago. And he needs more of a security blanket. He needs more of a tight end, in particular, like a Heath Miller that can move those chains. He's not been as good since Heath Miller has been off the Steelers. Now, that means Ben has been getting old, but it also means Ben hasn't been able to replace that production. Vance McDonald and a few others, Gentry, who they drafted last year out of Michigan, they haven't been able to give him near the production of a Heath Miller. Now, again, this could either be about Ben getting old and declining, or it could be about that position has not been filled. We're going to find out this upcoming season, but regardless of whether it's Ben, Duck, Rudolph, Winston, whoever is the quarterback for the Steelers, Eric Ebron and any tight end of that level, especially that age, who will be there for years to come, at least those 2 years, and maybe will re-sign, it'll really, really help that quarterback. It'll help them for that 5-yard curl route to move the chains, get those first downs. It'll help them in the red zone. It'll help them get touchdowns. He'll be a touchdown threat that opponents will have to deal with. He'll give you what Heath Miller gave the Steelers. He'll be that type of player back for Pittsburgh that they have not had in years again. Since Heath Miller's exit, they get him on a cheaper value than a bigger name who goes somewhere else but won't be as productive moving forward. Again, I feel like Ebron is going to end up as one of the most impactful moves made this offseason, certainly maybe the best move by the Steelers. Yeah, Jameis Winston is bad. I love it. We'll transition right now. Jameis Winston is bad, and this is my problem. Because Jameis Winston has not been a productive quarterback in the National Football League, and yes, he threw all those yards last year, but he had 30 interceptions, 35 overall turnovers if you include the fumbles. The man's been one of the most turnover-prone quarterbacks in league history if you equate time played, the amount of times he started, the passes attempted, and overall turnovers in his, 4 or 5 years with Tampa since coming to the NFL. It's been insane how turnover-happy he's been. However, for some bizarre reason, and you'll see it there, that was from, Spears. Spears throwing this out there, and he's always on First Take a lot. And now saying Jameis needs to go to Pittsburgh. And I saw last week, Michael Irvin brought it up, Stephen A. Smith brought it up, Max Kellerman brought it up. We could see it over there on Fox with Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp and churning these wires. Jameis Winston to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Everybody in the national media, or at least on those main shows that are getting all the traction, have brought up Jameis Winston and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think even Mike Greenberg, who I definitely respect in the national media, Greeny's even brought it up. He's mentioned it. They talked about it there on Get Up, and he kind of even supported Jameis Winston and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't get it. I don't get why. I don't understand why they want Jameis Winston to be a Steeler so bad. Are they getting a percentage of his money? Are they basically his agent? Am I accurate here in terms of my tweet that they deserve some commission for what Jameis Winston does in the offseason, and if he does become a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers especially? Because Again, the national media is pushing this narrative. And I'm not going to say that it's a 0% chance by any means. It may already have happened if you're watching this archive, because the Steelers have had a history of bringing in the Byron Leftwich, bringing in Michael Vick, bringing in those veteran quarterbacks, a lot of the time athletic quarterbacks. And I will say this, not to make this about race, but oddly they have had a lot of history of bringing in African-American quarterbacks to be their backup. Again, quarterbacks that need maybe to be reclamation projects, or African-American quarterbacks with a lot of talent that can fit their underband. That's kind of been a trend. So maybe that's where they're going with the connection of Jameis Winston. He just fits that Byron Leftwich, Michael Vick mold, maybe even a Charlie Batch mold. Here's the difference. Charlie Batch was a serviceable veteran who's not going to kill you if he comes in there. He proved that. If he came in, he may not win the game for you by himself. He's mostly going to manage the game, but he's not going to throw 3 or 4 picks on 3 consecutive passes and kill you. Byron Leftwich, his issues before the Steelers was mostly injuries. And no, he wasn't as good as maybe he was hyped in college, where he also dealt with injuries. But again, he wasn't going to turn over the football every other down. Neither was Michael Vick, who still has some athleticism, and he was a reclamation project again, but he was able to be serviceable for you, able to manage games, and then was able to actually show his athleticism that he still had and never going to lose, and be able to move the chains for you. That was all fine. I could see those moves at the time, especially when you have a younger Ben still in his prime, and you're going to have a Ben Roethlisberger who very rarely is going to need to leave games. This is a Ben who is coming off of missing most of last season. He's always been injury-prone in his career, despite it being a Hall of Fame career, but that's going to be even more prevalent now, I'd imagine. I highly doubt he plays every game next season, just off a guess. Some injury will happen. He'll miss a game. I also doubt he'll be around for more than 1 or 2 years at the most, probably then go into retirement. He probably just wants to end on a better note than what he finished with last year. And Jameis Winston in particular is maybe the worst case scenario for the Steelers to bring in. I just don't get it. It doesn't make sense. His issues, Jameis Winston issues, and I'll give you the stats right here. Where are they? Here you go. Jameis Winston's problems are the exact same issues of the Steelers' current backups. Mason Rudolph had a few games where he was playing well. Duck Hodges had a few games where he was playing well. People were getting excited about both of the two guys for a time. What soured? What made you sour on Mason Rudolph or Duck Hodges? It's that far right comb that I barely got on the screen, the interceptions. Well, look at Jameis Winston's. 15, 18, 11, 14, 30 last year. 30, okay? You soured on Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges, and they were young and inexperienced, but you soured on them because they turned over the football too much. They either threw interceptions or fumbled it. They didn't play smart. Their stupid mistakes turned over the football too much, and it killed drives, and it made it more hard on an offense that was already struggling. Jameis Winston might have a higher upside than those two guys. I'll say that as the only maybe argument to try to bring him in. He's a former number 1 draft pick. He's a former Heisman winner. But let me put you this way. It's not just he's had these problems in the NFL, and all of a sudden now you can help him be a better pro quarterback, and he has a higher upside. Back in college with Florida State when he was winning the national championship, he still was turning over the football too much. He had these turnover issues back in college, back in high school. His entire football life he's been turnover prone. It just didn't get brought up then. It wasn't as big of a deal then because he was so athletic. His teams were so good. He was on the best team in college football, obviously, and they would make up for it, and the athleticism that he had and his arm strength could help him make up for it in high school and in college football. Not in the NFL. You're not going to make up for those mistakes in the National Football League, no matter how many turnovers your defense is forcing or how well your defense is playing. Again, look to the 2019 Pittsburgh Steelers. Look to the 2019 Pittsburgh Steelers if you think turnovers can be made up for. The Steelers turned over the football tons. They would lose opportunities on offense. The defense would force turnovers. Minkah Fitzpatrick was a turnover machine for several weeks in a row. T.J. Watt was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. It didn't matter. They didn't make the playoffs. They didn't make up for those turnovers. They forced them. They didn't score. It didn't help you. The turnovers the quarterbacks made and the offenses struggled killed this team. And this is not here to kill Rudolph or Duck, and I've addressed that on past shows through the channel that you can find there on Pittsburgh Sports Live on Mike Drop or Steelers Now. You can also find all the archive content on this channel, by the way, at pghsportslive.com. So just search any there and you'll find it. They were young, they were inexperienced, and you didn't expect much. Your starter went down. That was just going to happen with the growing pains of young quarterbacks. But I don't want to deal with it with a free agent you're going to bring in who's been a veteran in this league, who's been around for 5 years, that started in the past, that had all that hype. He just hasn't achieved the hype. He's just been a bust. And if you do bring him in, it certainly shouldn't be for high money value. I just feel like Winston doesn't help you. It doesn't make sense. His issues are the same as the current backups. I don't get the national media wanting Jameis Winston on the Steelers so bad. I just don't get it, and I don't think it makes sense. I don't think he'll help the Steelers, and I don't think that if Ben does go down and you put in a backup, that you'd want to even put Winston in over Rudolph or Duck, because now they have a year under their belt. They played more than what they would have played a year prior if we were in this situation. And they may have learned from those mistakes. Yes, they're not going to be perfect. No, they're not going to be as good as Ben. And yes, it will probably mean your season's not going to make the playoffs if Ben goes down again. But Jameis Winston, we saw him just a season ago. He was more turnover prone than Rudolph or Duck. He was worse than those two guys. Yes, he threw for a lot of yards, but 35 turnovers, 30 interceptions. If you have Ben go down, you want a quarterback that will manage the game, a quarterback that will not kill you even if he doesn't win things for you by himself. You don't want tons of yards and all those interceptions. You don't want a bad Brett Favre-style year. You don't want worse than what Ben gave you a few years ago that actually hurt the team at that point. You need Ben to be more careful with the football, more efficient with the football, to go back to where he was in the middle of his career. You need him to throw less interceptions, despite even if that means throwing less yards and touchdowns. It'll help you overall as a team. It won't kill you as much. So you don't want to have Jameis Winston come in, throw those interceptions, and then kill you further if somehow he ends up as the guy coming in for Ben. It just doesn't make sense. So yeah, Jameis Winston is bad. I don't think the move makes sense, and that rumor just won't go away. So I almost was going to do a whole show to address it, and I may still if these rumors continue to churn, but I had to address it here. I wanted to give you guys a live chat here again. If you're just joining us, feel free to give me questions. I'm probably going to do this until maybe 2 o'clock, as long as we're active here. Maybe 1:45 maybe would make more sense, 1:50. Give you another half hour, 40-some minutes of this. And if you don't give me questions, I'll probably address the Winston rumors even more, as well as go through the roster. But the Steelers have made a lot of moves. The Steelers have been very, very active, and I addressed this before on how the NFL had to keep to their schedule. Number one, because of that show not long ago where I addressed the NFL players. I provided a message to the NFL players on agreeing to the CBA, the new CBA, and what that means with another game, another week of games played, their safety, the hypocrisy there. I get why they would have signed it, but I don't believe they won that deal. I certainly don't believe they won that deal. I believe they could have got more out of that deal. I understand why the veterans and the players making all the money would be upset about that deal and feel like, yes, it helps the lesser players a lot more, and that makes sense, but they could have got even more out of it. They could have, especially with these times, especially trying to avoid a lockout. And the more games is just because the owners want more money. I've addressed all of that. Again, SteelersNow.com, Pittsburgh Sports Live, go back through. But we are in bizarre times. We're finding out that sports aren't everything. We're finding out that life can go on without sports because the NCAA tournament didn't happen. The Stanley Cup playoffs may or may not happen. The NHL suspending the season. The NBA playoffs may or may not happen. The NBA spending a season. It's crazy out there. This is unparalleled territory. Grandfather's very, very old, almost 100 years old. I'll say that with full disclosure, and he's never seen anything like this. He's seen a lot, but never seen basically the world shut down. We're in a stay-at-home order, which I can work from home. I'm in a home studio here, but not everybody can, and it definitely can affect people. I have some colleagues that have lost their jobs because of this, especially at a former employer of mine at the Trib. I've seen a lot of colleagues who were still there or were hired after I left and no longer be able to be there. So that's going to affect their livelihood, and that's unfortunate. And this can affect everyone. I addressed that too throughout the channel. So go back and watch any of those past shows. But I had to do a live chat. I want to do a live chat because the Steelers, unlike all of that, have been active. The NFL has kept to their calendar. I get why they had to. even though they're not doing the face-to-face meetings. They can keep this calendar moving online. Teams are still making moves. The offseason in the NFL has felt like normal. It's been the headline news like it normally would outside of the coronavirus and COVID-19. So I get why they would. The NFL schedule is so in stone that if they change it in any way, it would ruin the calendar for 2 years. So as long as they keep safe, don't do face-to-face meetings, as long as they hold all that and they don't do a big parade at the NFL draft like normal, then I have no problem with it. But it made sense to do one of these live chats. I'm going to go back through here, catch up on some questions. The only reason Winston had so many yards and TDs is because Mike Evans and Godwin, that tons of talent that now Tom Brady is going to be able to show you what can happen when you have an efficient quarterback there. And yes, Brady's older, and I also addressed this recently. Brady's not going to give you what he gave you in his prime down there in Tampa. But he's had to mass teams the last few years with the Patriots that didn't have tons of talent. He still was able to win championships. He's now going to Tampa with tons of talent, and Mike Evans, etc., being there. And Jameis Winston was able to get yards and TDs, but he also didn't really fulfill that talent because he lost that talent. He threw those turnovers. He threw those interceptions. He laid the football on the ground every other play off of some snaps and ruined things with that talent. The Tom Brady, I would imagine, is at least going to play smarter football at the end of his career now and really show you what that talent can do. But that definitely helped things. He also threw tons of passes, and if you're going to throw that many turnovers, this is how you should evaluate a quarterback, a little different than the past. TDs, touchdowns, interceptions, that's all, or TDs, touchdowns, yards. That's all great. It's important to evaluate a quarterback. But when you have tons of interceptions, it takes away from all of that as well. And some of those touchdowns can also, a 5-yard dumper that somebody then runs 30 yards for a touchdown, the Cam Newton, Chris McCaffrey touchdown that's kind of being made famous. That's not really on the quarterback. That's mostly the receiver, the running back, or the tight end doing all that work. So it goes to show that there's a lot more to being a quarterback, and you should evaluate them more than just, off of touchdowns and yards and that issue. There's a lot more. Sorry, my hat was bothering me there. There's a lot more to it. And Jameis Winston was able to get the yards and touchdowns, but the interceptions were there. The interceptions ruined things. The interception canceled it all out and made it kind of a negative play. Poor Duck. What about Paxton Lynch? Well, the Steelers flirted with, and I thought maybe they actually should give him a nod there at the end of the season just to see how things went when they knew they weren't going to be a playoff team after, giving Duck and Mason Rudolph most of a shot throughout the season. If the Steelers bring a quarterback in, it's going to be a veteran guy they want to stabilize because they believe they can win now if Ben would go down. Clearly, they don't have confidence in Rudolph or Duck to lead a team to the playoffs because they weren't able to do it last year. I would feel more confident though moving forward in the future with Rudolph or Duck just because of the experience that they had and just now because they're still very, very young. Paxton Lynch wasn't somebody that I really wanted out of the draft. He wasn't somebody that I thought would have a great NFL success. I could see a reason why you'd want to see what you get out of Paxton Lynch. So if the Steelers season goes in the tubes or Ben retires and the Steelers don't have any other answers and they think they can try to figure something out or they need to figure something out or they're looking at the future of this franchise, I would then say look at Paxton Lynch a little bit. I'll be interested to see what happens in training camp, if he stays on the roster, if he can make the roster barring the offseason. And we know Duck didn't make the roster last offseason, played very, very well in training camp, and then had that success in the regular season, had his little magic carpet ride. So we'll see. Paxton Lynch is going to get a chance to throw some balls, and we're going to get a look at him in training camp if that happens, and if that's the same way, and if I can be there walking around the blistering heat of St. Vincent to watch the Steelers. And we'll see how he plays and how he looks then, and then we'll kind of be able to better answer that for the future. But he's not going to be in the equation for next season, I wouldn't imagine, because the Steelers believe it could be a championship season, and Ben was the missing piece. They might be wrong, but that's their belief, and that's what they're going to go with going in. Let's look here. Because he did it last year doesn't mean he'll do it again. Still a viable option over Mason and Duck and Lynch. And that's, I'm assuming, talking about Mason and Rudolph and all his interceptions last year. I'm not here to say that Mason Rudolph can't be better than Mason Rudolph, Duck, or Paxton Lynch. It's very possible. He's a former Heisman winner. He's a former number 1 draft pick. Rudolph, Duck, Lynch, they didn't have near the hype of Jameis Winston coming in. And Jameis Winston, unlike those guys, can improve the play and mask his issues with his athleticism that they don't have. I mean, he's not Michael Vick out there, but he has some athleticism they don't have. However, why are you going to add another guy who's very similar in terms of weaknesses? Number one, if Ben goes down, and yeah, he might be better than those three. He maybe has a higher upside than those three, sure. But I would have rather the Steelers brought in somebody like a Brian Hoyer. The Patriots bring him back. It's a great move for them with Brady gone. He's a former Patriot. He knows that system. He's not going to make tons of mistakes for you. He might not win games, but he could help manage a game and dink and dunk you through the field. We saw that even in Pittsburgh at Heinz Field. The Colts came in and Hoyer had to play. And he played okay. He played serviceable. He actually played solid football, played better than Duck and Hodges. Or played better than Duck and Mason Rudolph last year. Certainly was the better quarterback in that game when he came in. And no, he's not the future. He's a journeyman quarterback. But the advantage of him or somebody like him is he won't make tons of mistakes. If Ben goes down, you have to have somebody come in. You and Duck have learned from last year and are less prone to turnovers, or at least going to take care of the football better than last year. Maybe passing Lynch too. If not, then you're basically screwed. But we know Jameis Winston's not going to take care of the football. And again, I want to throw the stats up there for you. It's not just last season. Just because he did last year means he won't do it again. Well, no, he might throw more interceptions if he had an entire season to play, because that's been the progression. And maybe he wouldn't be as bad as last year and throw that many picks if he played an entire season. But he always throws a lot. He always turns it over a lot. 35 turnovers last year, including fumbles, 30 picks. 14 the year before, 11 the year before that, and that wasn't a full season, by the way. 18 and 15. So, okay, 14, which in 9 games, that's still a lot. 11 and 13, that's not that bad. 18 and 16, that's bad. 15 and 16, that's too many. All those interception years are too many, and yes, Ben has had, I believe he threw 16 a couple years ago. And guys, that's too many for Ben. But Ben hasn't produced that every single season where it's too many interceptions most of the time. If he's gone again, Winston is just more turnover prone. He's coming off a historically bad year for interceptions and overall turnovers because you have to factor in fumbles in those years as well. A lot of those interceptions have been the worst possible scenario. They aren't just regular picks. They've been pick sixes. He threw more pick sixes recently than Brady threw in the last decade. So the Buccaneers, who weren't all that bad last year and actually moved the chains offensively, I wouldn't be shocked if can flirt with 8-8 and 9-7 and get a chance at a late wild card position with Brady now. At least not throwing in many interceptions and be more careful with the football than Winston. That may be what it takes for the Buccaneers to actually win. But it's not going to help the Steelers. If Ben goes down, your season's basically probably over again for next year. But then you would need a guy who's going to take care of the football and not make the mistakes, and Winston's not going to be that answer. He's just not going to be that answer, guys. Hey, what's going on, Steeler Nation? Yep, there you go. Desmond, hi, how you doing? Again, is Ben going to be ready? That's a serious arm injury. Well, again, I'm not a doctor. If I was, I would talk about COVID-19 more. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to play one here on the radio. I'm not going to play one here on this YouTube channel. I'm not going to play one a part of my media career at all. We're not going to have anyone play doctor on Steelers Now and Pittsburgh Sports Live on any of the Now Network sites because none of us have a medical degree. None of us are doctors. Okay? None of us are going to be doctors. I will not pretend to be a doctor here in my media career at all. However, by all reports, it appears Ben's going to be fine. He's had a long recovery. We've seen him throw the football recently. It certainly appears from what the Steelers are saying he's going to be ready for training camp, at least going to be ready for the end of training camp. I'm sure they're going to take care of him there. He's going to be ready for opening kickoff, for game 1 of next season, for the preseason. That's what they're saying. That's what they're making us believe behind closed doors and even what's said to the public. Nothing is a guarantee. Again, I don't play a doctor in my media career, no matter where it will lie, and I don't condone anyone else playing a doctor without a medical degree, so I'm not going to get into it. It is a difficult injury to seemingly rebound from. He is a veteran, though. He's motivated to do so. He doesn't want to end on the note that he got hurt and wasn't that great the last year and a half. He wants to try to turn things around. The addition of an Eric Ebron, having players and receivers like a James Washington and a few others have another year of seasoning, step up with lesser quarterbacks last year at times. Hopefully Juju can turn it around. And I've said this too, and this is big, Juju has maybe the most pressure on him of any other NFL player coming into next season. He wasn't good without Antonio Brown creating all the space for him. It's much easier to be a number 2 behind a number 1 like a Hall of Famer in Antonio Brown. Juju's asked to be the one. If he wants the mega deal coming up, if he wants to be a number 1, if he wants to truly be an elite receiver, he's going to need to play better. He's going to need to catch those clutch passes and 4 first downs and not have as many drops as he had last year. He's going to have to stay healthy. He's going to have to create that space himself. And that didn't happen last year. We'll see if it happens next year. You also got to figure he'll be better, but that's a question mark. The Steelers need a running game. That's going to be a question mark as well with what's going to go on with James Conner, who also has pressure like Juju. But that's all around Big Ben. I am going to figure Big Ben's going to be better, or at least better than the recent quarterback options. And again, I don't know medically, but from all the reports, he'll be there. I'm sure they're going to take care of him in training camp. I would imagine he'll maybe miss that first week when almost all stars do, and Ben even did last year. We'll see, though. I can't say much more on it because, again, I don't know. What about his head injury or his beard injury? That's interesting. Yeah, Ben threw out a video there recently where Ben was giving you reports about COVID-19 and telling you to stay inside, which is good advice. You should. We're clearly staying inside right now with the home studio. But I almost thought it was Brett Kiesel. When I was scrolling through, I thought that was Brett Kiesel. He still has the beard, and I thought that once he started throwing, he was going to shave the beard. That's what Ben had said, that once he started throwing the football, he was going to shave the beard. He's throwing the football. We have video of that. He looks okay. He's going to be the starter next year. That's also been said, if he's healthy, and that appears going in that direction. And he hasn't shaved the beard. So I'm assuming he's going to go into training camp with a shaved beard. I'm assuming he's not going to have that beard with that helmet going in the heat of training camp at St. Vincent College. And man, it's 100 degrees there walking all over the place. And then going into next season with those pads on you and that beard. I'm assuming he's not going to do that, but we don't know. It'll be interesting. But I honestly swear to God, I honestly thought it was Brett Kiesel when I first was scrolling through there. So, yeah, the beard right now, I guess it's a negative for most of you. It seems like nobody likes it, but that's not going to affect his play. But it's just going to be an annoyance to him. I'm assuming that's going to be gone by the time he actually plays football or even gets into training camp. You want to talk about Todd Gurley? Okay, we can talk about Todd Gurley because I can connect him to the Steelers. Now, Todd Gurley is no longer a member of the Los Angeles Rams. Todd Gurley signing with Atlanta, going back home. Georgia boy, going to the Atlanta Falcons. They give him, think about, what, $5 million for the year? So they're giving him a new deal. He signed real fast, but it's not a mega deal. The mega deal he signed with the Rams a couple years ago, he doesn't actually end up getting that money. They ended up releasing him right before he was owed about $10 million, I believe. And what the Todd Gurley situation shows is the NFL doesn't value running backs. The NFL feels that a running back, an elite running back, is a luxury more than a necessity, and you just don't have to have them. The NFL has made it clear, guys. It's been made clear. The NFL has said, and this is multiple teams now, this is years of saying this, the NFL is yelling from the rooftops that they do not value running backs, that running backs are viewed more as, at least elite running backs are viewed more as luxuries over necessities. Because the Eagles won a Super Bowl a few years ago with multiple backs. The Patriots have went to multiple Super Bowls and won a couple recently with multiple backs without an elite running back. And even the year the Rams went to the Super Bowl and lost to New England and almost won that game, thanks, in part to the ground game, it wasn't because of Todd Gurley. He had a great regular season, but he got hurt in the playoffs. And C.J. Anderson rolled off his couch, fresh as a daisy, ran them through the playoffs, won the NFC title for them, was even more important than Jared Goff, who didn't have that great of a postseason, and then probably would have been Super Bowl MVP if they would have won that game. C.J. Anderson, who had been retired and had been home for a year, became the starting running back for the Los Angeles Rams going into the playoffs, ran them through the postseason, and not Todd Gurley, but C.J. Anderson led them to the NFC crown. That right there was probably when the Rams got together and made the decision, yes, he was the face of our franchise in the past, but now he's getting older. We don't want to pay him tons of money. He's an elite back. That's great. It's a luxury. It's not needed. We won an NFC title through a playoff run without him, with C.J. Anderson, while Todd Gurley was hurt. And we can do it again without Todd Gurley. And I don't know if that's true, but we'll see, and it's a decision that most NFL teams have made. teams have been able to win consistently without elite running backs and just using them as luxuries for a couple years, and once they have a chance in a mega deal, just not interested in paying it to them. And that does connect to Le'Veon Bell. This is why that I understood why Le'Veon Bell wanted to sit out the year. This is why I understood why Le'Veon Bell wanted to preserve his body, because he knew that running backs have a short shelf life, and every tackle, every down is like a car crash on their body. And the Steelers offered him a solid deal that was actually better than the deal he took with the Jets, but I knew he would never get the $17 million or all that money that he wanted initially, because, again, yes, he touched the football tons and was also a receiver, and I respect his hustle trying to get the most money he can, but it's just not smart business. The running backs have a short shelf life, a 4 or 5 year shelf life, probably even less than that as an elite back. They don't play past 30, or at least usually don't play past 30 unless they're Adrian Peterson here. 32 certainly is a max age for running backs. Their production will immediately fall off the cliff, where a quarterback might gradually fall off that cliff, like, say, Tom Brady. You just don't get that much out of your investment for a running back. They're not going to play long enough. They're not going to be doing it for you long enough. That's why the investment's better for a receiver. That's why it was smarter to give the money at the time to Antonio Brown, despite him going crazy. They didn't know that was coming. And then doing it to Le'Veon Bell. That's why the Steelers actually probably aren't going to cry too much for not having Le'Veon Bell, and he's not been good with the Jets, but even if he was, it wouldn't matter. You're not going to have a long shelf life with a back, and elite running backs aren't necessary. They're just viewed as luxuries out there. And James Conner, Benny Snell, and a few guys together might be able to give you some production that's good enough. The Steelers' running game needs to improve, but it doesn't matter. They're not going to find one elite running back, and if they do find it in the draft, if Benny Snell or somebody else turns it on from the draft, they're not going to pay him tons of money, or if they do, they're not going to have long. They're going to do the same thing happened to Todd Gurley. It sucks for running backs, but they're just luxuries right now. They're giving a mega deal to a running back is just not smart business right now in the National Football League, no matter how good he is, and Todd Gurley is one of the best. And let me see here, another comment about my boy, Jameis Winston. I respect your reasoning, but the tutelage of Ben in our system could help Jameis mature in and to be the quarterback of the future, especially with Matt Canada as the quarterback coach. I'll say this, Desmond. The only possibility of me being wrong is because of what you're saying. Is because of the Steelers system, is because of Matt Canada coming in, and obviously he's had success. He's familiar with the Pittsburgh area, former Pitt offensive coordinator. He's had success with quarterbacks. He maybe can be said to be a quarterback guru. Big Ben has been proven, even though obviously he doesn't want to relinquish his starting job when healthy, but he has been proven to be a good mentor to formerly troubled quarterbacks or quarterbacks that need to turn it around, reclamation projects like a Mike Vick, like a Byron Leftwich. And that was even younger Ben, so now I think he'll even be more mature. And Rudolph and Duck said that Ben was wonderful with them last year, even when Ben wasn't playing, and that he was a mentor to them and was kind of acting like an offensive coordinator to them on the sidelines and was really helping them. And they had good moments, so I wouldn't buy that. Buy that that's a lie. I would certainly believe them, and Ben was probably helpful to that. So with the new offensive coordinator in place, with somebody that I think will take better care of the quarterback than maybe recent offensive coordinators, and with Ben there as a veteran, as a future Hall of Famer, not too crazy. I could see that. I could see Jameis Winston, if he comes in and plays football for the Steelers and actually gets into game action, being better than he was with Tampa. Now, granted, Bruce Arians was there, and he's certainly a quarterback guru. He's certainly the quarterback whisperer. That's part of why Brady went there in addition to the money. So it's not like Jameis Winston didn't have that last year. Jameis Winston had Bruce Arians, who Ben loves and Ben cries for, and Ben's going to give tons of recognition for when he gets inducted in the Hall of Fame, who is the quarterback guru of quarterback gurus. He helped Peyton Manning. He's now going to work with Brady. He's worked with Carson Palmer. He's been a guy that's always connected around quarterbacks, and great quarterbacks either at the beginning or end of their careers, either helping them at the beginning of their career get better eventually, or at the end of the career getting as much as he can out of a quarterback. Look at what he did with Carson Palmer those last few years when he was playing very, very well for Arizona after many thought his career was over. So Bruce Arians is a great quarterback guru. I think Matt Canada can also work magic, but if it didn't happen with Bruce Arians, what makes you believe it's going to happen with Matt Canada? This isn't 1 or 2 bad years for Winston. It's been an entire life in which he's been way too turnover prone. It's the same mistakes as the current backups. There's a possibility he's better than he was in Tampa. I don't want to discount it. I could be wrong, and I'll admit it here on a future show if I am. But to be completely honest with you, again, I wouldn't do it. The upside I don't see is worth it, and I feel like I'd rather have a veteran who's not going to make the mistakes, and we know is not going to make the mistakes, in there as a security blanket if Ben goes down, and give you that game-managing security that you did not have last year with all the turnovers. And then if you need somebody besides that guy, Mason Rudolph or Duck now has more experience and then could go in. But I don't like Jameis Winston being added to this equation, because then you're not going to bring anybody else in as a veteran. He'll be that guy. He turns it over way too much, and it's a major question mark that I just don't see the fix happening. So it doesn't do it for me. What about Coach Randy? Yeah, that's another part of it. Throw him in the equation again. Seals could bring back Martavis Bryant. I don't hate that, Cecil. I've heard that brought up by somebody else here, and we'll probably do this another 5 or 10 minutes if you guys keep giving me questions. If not, I'll close it off sooner. He was troubled a few years ago. He had to be traded to the Raiders. He basically was forcing to go out of town, and they're not going to put up with that, clearly, and they shouldn't. But now you're going to get him for basically next to nothing. You do need help at receiver. We addressed this earlier, so go back and listen on the pressure that's under Juju and how he needs to be better. James Washington, Deontay Johnson. There are receivers there who had their moments last year, but they didn't prove they can be even serviceable as the number 2. Nobody really truly stepped up. Dante Moncrief didn't work out for Pittsburgh. So I wouldn't be against bringing in Martavis Bryant on a low-run deal, a 1-year deal, low-risk, high-reward. He has tons of talent. He's a burner. He can take the top off the defense. He can be that playmaker for you. He showed that at times with Ben. He and Ben apparently had a good relationship. Ben could take him under his wing again. He just wanted more money. It didn't work out. He went about the wrong way. He hadn't produced enough. He was a little bit of a malcontent. And they had to move him then. But I would not be shocked if he got a little humbled now, because he obviously didn't get any success with the Raiders, and now you bring him in for next to nothing. So I actually do like that. I've heard that from others. That has obviously not happened yet, but I would certainly be about that. Cam Newton, I don't love that either, guys. He's not as turnover prone as Jameis Winston, so I maybe would like it better than Winston, but it fits in the same category. That's a veteran who's been around. I get it. I'll say this. I'd rather Cam Newton than Jameis Winston. I think there's a higher upside there, even though he's older. I don't think he turns it over as much, so I'd rather that. But he could be upset about not being a starter. He's clearly upset about what's going on in Carolina and the fact that they invited him to exploit or trade. So unlike Jameis Winston, who really has no options and no teams are throwing money at him, and he would basically be happy to do whatever and just get on an NFL roster right now and work his way back, like Michael Vick, like Byron Leftwich were in that situation, Cam Newton's probably going to be upset. Tim Newton would cause more controversy if Ben would get hurt in terms of wanting to steal the job for the season or something like that. And that rumor and that controversy would exist a lot more with Cam Newton. He's a former MVP in this league. I've argued before, though, he's a bit overrated, and I still do feel like that. He's a good quarterback. He's been a good quarterback. He's even been great for a year or so. But he's also that quarterback that's the example of what I said recently. He throws a dumper to Christian McCaffrey. That's 5 yards. He then runs 35 more yards, gets in the end zone, and Cam gets credit for that TD, and that helps his stats. He's a guy that can throw yards and touchdowns, but he also makes mistakes, and unlike even Winston, he doesn't complete enough passes. He is less than 60% completion percentage in most of his NFL seasons. He is one of the worst quarterbacks who's probably going to be a borderline Hall of Famer. I don't know if he'll get in if he doesn't play that much anymore, but let me put it this way. No other Hall of Fame quarterback, if he would ever get there, because some argue him being there, would have a completion percentage that poor. Again, he doesn't complete 60% of his passes. He doesn't make receivers better. He relies on talent around him. He's a better than Jameis Winston. He's been more successful than Jameis Winston. I'd rather have him than Jameis Winston, but I don't want Cam Newton either. He's a bit overrated to me in most of his career. I certainly wouldn't want him to be a starter. It would create more controversy, and I don't see that either. I'd rather have a veteran backup who's not going to create the controversy. You have Duck and Rudolph there. I think Rudolph has a higher upside. I think he has a better arm than Duck. That's going to certainly be a debate, and I addressed that on a past show on Steelers Now and Pittsburgh Sports Live. I would go Rudolph over Duck, which I'm sure that would end up another 2 hours if we're going to debate that I can't do right now, but maybe we'll address in a future live chat or a future show. But I like Newton more than Winston if he's fine with being the backup and there's not going to be controversy there. But I don't like it really that much either. He's overrated in his career. He relied on a running back to produce most of his yards and do most of his work for him in recent seasons. He's certainly decline the last few years. I think there's less of a chance that he can be fixed than Winston just because Winston's younger. Maybe I'm talking myself out of it now, honestly. I don't really want either of these guys, folks. No. I don't feel it with Newton or Winston. One's overrated and older. The other one just really has never been good in the NFL and way too many turnovers. Maybe Newton will be more careful with the football, but no, he's just not accurate enough with the football. And that's going to be something I'd want out of a game manager or a backup as well, which none of those guys are. And Andy Dalton's still out there, by the way. I think I'd rather have him than either of those. I don't love him either. The Brian Hoyer thing, that's the guy I would have loved to have, but that clearly is not going to happen as he's going back to Indy. It's just a sucky situation right now. I wouldn't be against, because here's my point of it too when you address who's out there. If you bring in Winston or Cam Newton, you're dumping Rudolph for Duck. And after last season, after the work there and them getting better and going through the growing pains, no, I wouldn't want my future necessarily to be with either one of those guys, and I wouldn't want them to start next season. But I think I'd be totally okay with Ben as your starter and Rudolph and Duck stay on the roster. And that's your three quarterbacks. That's your depth chart. If you can't have Brian Hoyer, if you can't have a veteran like that who's going to be careful with the football, then keep how it is. They have another year of experience. They've been around longer. They're going to be better, you would figure, from that experience. And I would just rather keep either one of those two guys or keep both of those two guys because one of them won't make the team if you bring in the other two, than to add Cam Newton to the mix with the fact that he's not accurate, or to add Jameis Winston to the mix with the fact that he's so turnover prone. Just I'd almost rather keep it the way it is if I have to choose. Anything else here? Final questions as I'm going to get to rounding this out. Let me see. I do think the Derek Watt move is going to be great. Now, obviously, he's not going to help you in the running game in terms of yards. He's not a runner in terms of a fullback that actually will churn. He's not going to do that. He's not going to be a Kevin Falk type who kind of played that fullback running back split for the Patriots in the early 2000s. That's not going to be what Derek Watt's going to do. He's going to mostly be a blocker, but the Steelers heavily need a blocker. If they bring in Eric Ebron to be another pass catcher to finally be that tight end security blanket that Heath Miller was, then that would mean you need another blocker, and they can certainly help them as a blocker. He can help move the chains for the running game even if he's not getting the yards. You paired him with Melvin Gordon with the Chargers. I'd like to see him paired with somebody, but maybe you get him on the field with Benny Snell a lot who can carry the rock as he can block since they're similar body size. Maybe you sprinkle him and James Conner, or James Conner is your feature back as long as he's healthy. Granted, that's a major question mark, and his health will be part of the pressure that's on him coming into next season and a major question mark. I don't really feel like you have a feature back on the Steelers, but as we addressed with Todd Gurley in that conversation, that's a luxury, not a necessity. And I think Derek Watt's going to be a major deal. They're going to love him in the locker room. Obviously, TJ is going to look out for him and going to love having him there. I think that's going to be a major factor for the Steelers, going to be a major thing that's going to help Pittsburgh is having him there, especially to block and move the running game and just block in general. And then Wisniewski is another great signing. I mean, he's been a good luck charm, and anything he touches has turned to gold. Two-time Super Bowl champion, winning it with the Eagles, and then last year with the Chiefs. He's a Pittsburgh boy. He's a Central Catholic alum. He's a Penn State alum, so still kind of stayed local for college in the region. The Steelers fans are going to love him. They're going to love having a local guy here. They love Pittsburgh guys. I'm a fellow Central alum, so I'm certainly going to root for a guy from Central Catholic now on a Pittsburgh team, now on the Steelers. He's been a great player. He's again going to help that team. He's going to fit the role that Ramon Foster leaves when he retires, so that kind of replaces Ramon Foster, who it's going to be a big loss to the Steelers locker room, but I think Wisniewski's actually going to be better for the Steelers on the field the last few years because Ramon Foster has been dipping a bit, and again, that Pittsburgh flavor is going to be good. Penn State alum, Central Catholic alum, more importantly, so I'm happy he's there. Any final questions here as we go through? Wow, that's a one hell of one that you want me to close with. I will try to get this done quickly and add that one in. That's not Steelers related, but that's, wow. That is usually a loaded question, folks. That would need a whole hour show by itself probably, and most national circuits can barely finish their program when they address this because it gets so polarizing. That one is let me see who asked that. Aiden Jacobs, yeah. Is Eli Manning a Hall of Famer? Wow. I'll try to do this quick. He's going to get in, guys. He's going to get in because he has the Manning name, because he has thrown tons of yards. he does have a reasonable amount of touchdowns, and of course the two moments, those two big moments with Super Bowl MVPs and two rings on his finger on two major Super Bowl victories with the Giants over the Patriots, especially back in '07, beating that undefeated team, throwing that late game pass and that game winner with Rodney Harrison hanging on David Tyree and the helmet catch and everything that was. So the moments and the name are going to get Eli Manning into the Hall of Fame. For me, he wouldn't be there. I do have a tighter hold over Hall of Famers. I feel like it should be a little harder of a bar than it really becomes. Certainly, even in the NFL, but certainly in other sports, maybe even more so the National Football League. There's been a logjam of some guys that were definitely deserving that also didn't get in right away. But Eli Manning's going to get in right away because of the name, and he does have some career numbers. But if you actually look at his overall spread, if you look at his overall career, he probably had, maybe 2 or 3 elite seasons, even if that. The years they won the Super Bowl, he wasn't that great in the regular season, threw a lot of turnovers, threw a lot of interceptions throughout most of his career. He basically was a poor man's Brett Favre without the MVP seasons, without the touchdown passes being as plentiful as they were with Favre, without those career marks. So less of career marks, without those elite seasons, and just about as many mistakes and interceptions if you look at it year to year. And he had too many years where he threw tons of interceptions. He had too many of those poorly efficient years. He didn't have enough elite seasons. He's going to get in, but I wouldn't put him there. I do believe he's a bit overrated, and a guy that signed this offseason, Phillip Rivers, who is with the Colts, I think it's a solid signing for them and him, has been very, very underrated in his career. And if he was drafted by the Giants and Manning was drafted by the Chargers and that worked out despite the drama of that 2004 NFL draft, maybe Rivers would have 2 rings and Eli Manning wouldn't have any. Yes, he had to get there to make those plays, and he has those moments in those big games, but those regular seasons, those defenses mostly led them there. His receivers made him better rather than him making somebody else. I can't say he made anybody. He has the career numbers, he has the name, he's going to get there, but for me he's been overrated. Threw too many picks, doesn't have that many elite seasons, wasn't efficient with the football. The wins aren't even there for somebody that wants to hang on wins. He had a 500 record and missed the playoffs tons, even those 2 years were special. So he's going to get there, but I wouldn't put Eli Manning in the Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, though, I'm not the guy who can make that decision. What about Dobbs? Yeah, he ended up being traded to Jacksonville last year because Mason Rudolph beat him out, and Rudolph did beat him out in training camp. I was there. Rudolph was better in training camp. Dobbs did not have a good training camp, but maybe it's a possibility. I don't see how that would make any sense. Maybe it's a possibility in 2 or 3 years if you want to just do a reclamation project again, but not really, no. I'd rather have Rudolph and Duck again. You're not going to go back down the path of Dobbs. He's already off the team. They already traded him once. They got some value for him with a draft pick. I don't believe that there's any more seasoning that's impressive to me over Rudolph or Duck. And maybe you say you're just washing your hands of Rudolph and Duck because of last year and you'd rather go back to Dobbs in the future. But no, I don't see that. He's just too young. The Steelers are done with Dobbs now. He's a nice guy, but he's done. And again, I would rather just leave it alone and go Ben, Rudolph, and Duck based on having more experience from last year, and Ben maybe having 1 more year in the sun. And then they got to worry about the draft. They got to worry about the future. It's not there probably, but there's not a veteran that I like them bringing in, honestly, and they're not going back down the road of Josh Dobbs. Want to make sure that you're aware to hit us up here throughout the Now Network, Pittsburgh Sports Now, SteelersNow.com, where a lot of this offseason news is, and this is the one sport that's certainly not sleeping and not on pause. A lot of NFL news happening as the NFL is keeping to its calendar year, and again, they had to, but they are. A lot going on Steelers Now there. That's the headline of the site. News, notes, analysis, all there. There's even a Steelers Talk section there, column there in the top right that has all these shows. So SteelersNow.com, Pittsburgh Sports Now, the mothership, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, WV Sports Now, and I will also say we do need some help there on the Twitter because we had to retool it. So follow us at WV Sports Now on Twitter for the West Virginia content. I'm going to do West Virginia shows as well as these, and really anything going on in the Pittsburgh sports world that does happen and is active, any off-season news or when these leads get back going. Pittsburgh Sports Live, pghsportslive.com for the archive content of this site. Pittsburgh Sports Live there on YouTube. Make sure to search there and get Pittsburgh Sports Live on YouTube. And do what this says. Click on the subscribe button. Make it easier for it to get the content to you and help us keep this network moving and paying the bills here. Pittsburgh Sports Live on Facebook, at PGH Sports Live on Twitter, at PGH Sports Live on Twitter, at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter, and again, SteelersNow.com. It's the one sport that is very, very active, and there's going to be a lot of news there because they're sticking to their calendar as they kind of had to. But follow me at MikeAsti11 on Twitter. We'll do more live chats. We'll try to do more live chats like this since I'm going to have some more time, and we're going to be a lot of things here at home with the stay-home order for the next 2 weeks. So I'm trying to do some midday live chats for you. Give me a message or hit me up there on Twitter if you need to as well. Follow me at MikeAsti11 on Twitter. And again, the Steelers are very, very, very active and I think very successful in making their team better. I like all the moves. I don't like the one rumor, though, and that one move of Jameis Winston. I just don't like it at all.